So I'd like to start first off just by introducing you guys to the Pembina Institute and the kind of work that we do. Pembina is a national nonprofit think tank that works on energy and climate change issues across Canada. We have offices in Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Drayton Valley, Yellowknife, Toronto, and Ottawa. We work on climate and energy issues through a variety of approaches, namely consulting, education, research, and advocacy. As I mentioned, me and my two colleagues that are presenting this webinar are part of the Sustainable Communities Group. And the Sustainable Communities Group works with municipalities, primarily in BC and Alberta, and what we see our role as is helping to network leading municipalities who are working on interesting issues around energy and climate policy. We also help advance and design cutting-edge policy, which is basically some of the work that we're going to be talking about today around energy labeling, and we see our role as helping to share and leverage learning. So we like to do research once and share it with as broad an audience as possible. So today we're going to be speaking about specifically one of our larger projects that we've been working on for the past few years, our Green Building Leaders project. Many of you on the phone have been engaged with this project over the years. This project started in 2008 and has continued over the years since then. The Green Building Leaders project started as a way to engage with leading communities in BC on building issues, and we were trying to think about how can municipalities improve energy and conservation from buildings in their communities, either in new or existing buildings. There's a fairly complex looking flowchart up on your screen right now, but essentially we just wanted to show sort of the breadth of the work that we've been doing under the Green Building Leaders project. And as I mentioned, our goal is to network leading local governments to advance cutting-edge policy and to share and leverage learning. And we've been doing that in a variety of areas, including energy efficiency, renewable energy, and some supportive pieces around policy and capacity building. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about all of the policies that we have on this slide, but I just wanted to put this up for those communities that haven't been engaged in the Green Building Leaders project from the beginning, so you could see some of the things that we have been working on, and if there's something that we're not going to talk about today that you are interested in, please definitely feel free to get in touch and to find out more about what we've been doing. So what we're going to focus on today within the Green Building Leaders project is the labeling work that we've been doing. So if you follow the flow chart from the energy efficiency column, one of the approaches and policies that we think can have an impact in BC communities in improving the energy efficiency of new and existing buildings is building labeling and standards, as well as, of course, better building code. So what we're going to be talking about today is under that building labeling and standards column, and talking about the research that we've been doing with a few of our key Green Building Leader partners and some of the pilot design work that we've been doing. So you can see the orange box around what we'll be speaking about today. So what I'd like to do now is my colleagues Tom Pierre and Ellen were the key leads on doing the main research for the Building Labeling project, and I'd like to hand it over to Ellen to give you an introduction to the building labeling work that we've been doing and to start to talk about some of the conclusions that we've come to. And I did also just want to mention that I have been taking the role of community liaison in the Green Building Leaders work up until this point, but starting a few months ago, Ellen is actually going to play that role. So for those existing Green Building Leader partners on the phone and any potential new interested partners, Ellen is going to be your key contact, and so her information is at the end of this presentation on the slide. So in particular, if you want to get more information, she's the right contact. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Ellen.
Thanks, Claire, and welcome everyone. We're so happy that you could join us today for this webinar. And we're really going to be talking about the work we've been doing on building labeling, as Claire said. And we've got here, of course, an image of homes, the kind of homes that we find in all of our communities, and the ENERGUIDE label. So the agenda today that we're going to be going over is we're going to talk a bit about the context of the project and the role of building labeling in green building leaders and in moving communities forwards on their energy and climate policies and programs. We're going to talk a bit about the labeling at point of sale policy design that we've been working on. And we took this out to 3 communities to do stakeholder workshops with them, and we had a lot of really good feedback and input that led to some redesign of the policy, so we'll share that with you as well. And then we want to end with next steps and opportunities to engage, because we do have funding for the next year to move forward on this project. And of course, the questions and answers. And as Claire has noted, feel free to type your questions in to your webinar slide box along the side as we move along, and she'll collect those questions and we'll have a discussion at the end. We just wanted to start showing an ENERGUIDE label so that we all know what we're talking about, and we've also compared it here to a nutrition label on a can of soup. Really, the energy label helps us in the same way that a nutrition label does, which is to understand what's going on, stuff that we can't normally see. So when we pick up a can of soup at the supermarket, we don't necessarily know what's in it, but the nutrition label helps us to understand what's in it. And similarly with homes, we think that having an energy rating and a label can also help us to understand the energy performance of that home. The context for this really is that buildings represent over 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions in communities in BC. And communities have set community energy and emissions plans and move forward with trying to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions to meet their targets that they've set. And there's some real challenges working with the building sector, particularly a very diverse building stock. A lot of homeowners, so you're working with a lot of different people that you need to reach out to, and few points of interaction with the regulatory system. So a real challenge with the building stock in this province, and we think that labeling is one of the points of entry into that. So when we think about the benefits of labeling and getting these ENERGUIDE ratings for the existing and new housing stock, we're thinking about it in terms of informing consumers. So there's an information void right now. If people are wanting to know about the energy information or performance of a house that they're considering buying, they may be able to get it if the existing owners will share their utility bills, but there's no system in place really that allows you to compare buildings across each other and just easily access that information. We think that labels also can promote efficiency as a sale factor. Now, having said that, I would say that it's one factor among many that goes into home buying decisions. So we don't foresee a really rapid market shift or change in sales because of home labeling, but we do think that it can become part of the factors that lead to decision making around home sales. And really, we think that the benefit of home labeling is to start a conversation. When you get the audit done, you also get a report that suggests cost-effective upgrades and different things that you can introduce to your home to improve its energy efficiency. The energy audits are a first step to access incentive and financing programs. So before you can get financing or incentives back from the government on your energy efficiency upgrades, you need to have an audit done and you need an energy label. And can also help to engage citizens on climate action. So again, thinking about the hundreds of homeowners in different communities, energy labeling is one way to start to engage citizens around climate action, the commitments that communities have made, and also the commitments that individuals and homeowners can make as well. And lastly, in terms of the benefits of labeling, they're really a great way to collect data on the current and new housing stock. So if municipalities do want to design other policies as well, for example, maybe an incentive program to help with energy retrofits, then they will have the data so that they can design a really good program and be able to put together an effective supportive policy. So we think that collecting the data and having municipalities understand the state of their building stock will help moving forward with other policies and programs as well. Now, we have had energy labeling in Canada since 1998 when it was introduced. And in that time, fewer than 10% of residential homes across the country have actually had an audit done and gotten an energy guide rating. The key driver in those audits was a lot of the incentive programs, particularly the federal ones that were there for quite a long time, eco-energy ones, but also in BC, the Live Smart ones. Both of those programs have been significantly reduced over the last year or so, so we no longer have those key drivers right now in place. We have had point-of-sale pilots in BC with voluntary labeling. The Real Estate Association has done this in Oak Bay, for example, Prince George, providing incentives, so covering the cost of the audit or partially covering the cost of the audit, and then putting the ENERGUIDE rating up on the MLS listing. The uptake rate was very, very low for these programs, and we see a number of reasons for that, but we think that one of them is a first on the dance floor syndrome, which is that if it's not mandatory and it's just voluntary and you're the first person to do it, you're not quite sure if there's potentially a bit of a risk to that. There's not a lot of comparison homes out there for people to look at. So really have that challenge of trying to get people to take that first step. And in general, what we see from all of this and thinking about, I think really that we've had the rating system since 1998, we have fewer than 10% of homes that actually have ratings, is that as long as the program is voluntary, the coverage will remain quite low. It's hard to get that coverage to really spread so that it can be widely available so that people can be informed about energy efficiency for the majority or all of the homes that they're looking at. There have been labeling requirements brought in elsewhere that are mandatory, and I think the biggest one is the European Union. Denmark in the 1990s brought in a mandatory home labeling program. It's also now in Germany, France, Portugal, and other places. And you can see some of the sample European labels here, the image here, where they use a grading system that's sort of like being in school, where you get a grade on your paper. In this case, you're getting a grade on your home. And it's really easy to read system, and these labels are attached to the houses that are graded, and they stay with those houses even as home ownership changes. So when you move into the home, when you decide to purchase a home, when you move into the home, you have this ENERGUIDE or energy rating so that you can see where the performance is supposed to be for your home. And that exists. That was brought in quite a long time ago in Denmark, as I said, and across the European Union. There are a number of programs in North America as well. In Austin, Texas, the local energy utility actually requires energy labeling for all homes that are hooked up to its system. Washington, D.C. has energy ratings. Berkeley, California has mandatory energy labeling requirements that are also tied to, they have additional programs as well, some standards around energy efficiency when you do a renovation and that sort of thing. So a number of places have labeling requirements already that are mandatory. So in our process, and I'm going to pass this over to Tom Pierre in a minute here, in our process we collaborated with leading communities, with our Green Building Leaders partners, and really started this process at their request. They were interested in finding ways to engage with their citizens around energy efficiency and how to improve the energy efficiency of the building stock, and we're interested in looking at energy labeling as one of the ways forward on that. And so in phase one, which we've wrapped up now and we're sharing with you, we did the background research, some of which I've just shared with you, drafted policy design, and we took this policy out and tested it with stakeholders, and we, as I said, got a lot of great feedback and input, and then revised the policy design and came up with some recommendations to move forward. So moving into phase two, which is this year, we'll be working on revising and again that policy and doing some more testing of it and potentially piloting as well. So I'm going to hand it off to Tom Pierre, who is in charge of this phase of the project and will be moving us forward, and he's going to go through and share with you our process.
Thanks, Ellen. So Tom Pierre here speaking. And just to take a step back and look at the core of labeling at point of sale is very simple. So houses, in our case, we're looking at single family homes, either attached or detached, but not multi-unit residentials and not commercial and institutional. So single family homes, before being sold, would require an energy label. If they already have an energy label, that's great, it's good to go. If they don't, they need to get an energy assessment from a certified NRCan energy advisor. And from this, they get two things. They get an ENERGUIDE rating, which gets posted on MLS and other listings as a quick way for people to assess rapidly and compare houses on their energy efficiency. And they get the detailed report with the kind of the current status of the energy systems of the home being described, and also suggestions for the best energy efficient and cost-effective renovations they can do. And that report can then be shared with prospective buyers who can integrate that information when they consider their moving in renovations. And it's also shared, as we said, with the city as a way to collect data on the building stock. And that's the basic kind of design, along with some of the process about how that would get implemented, that we presented to the communities to stakeholders in Dawson Creek, Campbell River, and Fort St. John. And in those workshops, we had a representation from city councilors, staff, realtors, real estate board representatives, energy advisors, builders and contractors and developers, and local environment NGO. And to give us a flavor of those conversations, we have on the line Kevin Henderson, who's the Director of Infrastructure and Sustainable Development at the City of Dawson Creek. And so Kevin, are you there? Do you want to give us a sense of how the conversation happened in Dawson Creek? That workshop was in the spring. So give us a moment as we bring Kevin on the line. Yep.
Sorry, it looks like they are not on the line, and they don't have their audio code entered. So I'm not sure, Kevin, if you're able to hear. If you can reconnect via the phone, we can input in the audio code. We can get you on the webinar here. Tom Pierre, maybe you can just continue, and we'll come back to Kevin. Yeah, we'll come back to Kevin if we can get him connected.
This is why we need information, because the technology fails sometimes, and we need people to know what's in their books. So if we get Kevin back, we'll get his perspective. But here's a rough summary of what we've heard in these three workshops, is that generally all the participants were very supportive of home energy improvement, the need for home energy improvement and efficiency, and supportive of municipalities taking action on this. The theme of the importance of a homeowner education on energy efficiency came up again and again, and also the importance of generally market education, so realtors, developers, sellers, that there needs to be more capacity building around energy efficiency there as well to communicate those information. And there was, frankly, a range of opinions around whether a mandatory labeling program was the best way to get to trigger this conversation and get that information out there. From people very supportive saying, yeah, this is a no-brainer, we need to move on this, all the way to people like saying, no, I don't think this is a good idea, and I will oppose it if I can. So we had a pretty broad range of opinion, which is what we expected, but nevertheless, the conversation were very constructive, and people were game to play with us and say, okay, this is what I think about it, but if it were to be implemented, this is how it could work well, or this is what's important to me for it to actually work. So people were really willing to engage and look into this. And so some of the barriers and concerns that were flagged, I'll present to you now. And enforcement was a big theme that came up. How is this program going to be enforced and monitored? And for new homes, it's pretty straightforward. We can tie it to the permitting process. So the assessment based on plans, the first part of the assessment for new homes, would be required to obtain a building permit. That can inform even some building decisions. And then once the house is built, there's a kind of a final visit by the energy advisor to check that it was built according to plan, test air leakage and things like this, and that gets the final ENERGUIDE rating and report, and that would be required to get the occupation permit. So there's a very easy kind of compliance and enforcement route for new homes. It's trickier for existing homes, and that's something that we struggled with throughout the workshops. Originally, we had, in mind that maybe we can do the monitoring through looking at what's going on in the MLS, and we had a pushback from realtors partially on this one, which was pretty fair critique, which was that would put realtors in a position of being enforcers of this policy and would put them at a sort of a disadvantage. So we took that in and we looked at other ways to enforce, and eventually what we realized is that we can verify compliance basically by comparing changes to the tax roll, which indicate a change in property ownership, to the list of homes that have got ENERGUIDE ratings. So comparing these two lists, we can make sure that basically if a house was sold, we can check whether it got an energy assessment done or whether it already has an energy assessment. So that allows us to do basic kind of program monitoring. And we can also keep an eye on listings, so MLS and private listings, to assess how well this information is being disclosed out there. But as soon as the program is communicated well and there's a way to ensure that people are actually doing the assessments, we expect that the market will adjust and will know, buying realtors will know that this information is available and will start to ask for it. And then the market will take it on and it'll become sort of business as usual. And that was a big part of the conversation, and we kind of came to this model after the last workshop. So for some of the people that were in the workshop that aren't present, maybe it's the first time they hear about it. So some of the concerns that were raised by realtors fall in three main categories. One is the risk of losing business to private sales. Again, if they're seen as being the enforcers, there's a concern that people might sell their home privately to avoid having to comply. There's the risk of the sale being delayed, particularly in hot real estate markets. If there's an extra step to get an energy assessment done, could that impede the sales process when there's relatively quick turnover? And the last kind of category of concern is what do we do with houses with low ENERGUIDE ratings? How will that affect the sale? Will that complicate the sale? And our sense is that a lot of these issues can be addressed through good policy design. So on the losing business to private sales, there's two main aspects that we need to keep an eye on. One is to make sure, as I said earlier, that the enforcement is the same for private sales as for realty facilitated sales. So homeowner will have to do it in either case. But also it's important to keep the cost of the energy assessment low. Right now it's about $350. There's often incentives that pay for part of this or all of this, and it's important to keep that cost low. Part of the story we heard a lot around losing business was related to the requirement for mobile homes to get electric certification. So they need to get an electric safety assessment before they're being sold. And currently, from what we understood, realtors cannot post the home on the MLS if they don't have that energy certification, which costs about $2,000. So that's a real barrier to people that are often low income selling mobile homes, and therefore people sort of avoid the whole process by selling it privately under the radar. So by keeping the energy assessment costs low, $350 is a lot more affordable, even less, even more if there's incentives, and making sure that it's enforced, whether it's the house is sold on MLS or privately, will help avoid that concern. Regarding the risk of delaying the sale, Currently, there's a maximum wait time for energy assessment by contract energy providers. Energy assessment providers have to provide an assessment within 2 weeks of when it's requested. Now, for certain real estate market, that's still too long. House can turn over much faster than 2 weeks. So there's two things we can try to shorten those wait times. But also, we believe it's important for the program to be flexible to allow quick sale. And how that can be implemented essentially to communicate that the spirit of the program and the requirement is that when the house when the decision to sale is made, people should engage towards getting an energy assessment. But if they sell before they get the energy assessment done, it's okay to sell the house, and the energy assessment just needs to be done before the closing date, which is generally a significant period of time after the actual sale. So we would allow people to post homes. It would not be, you can't post your home on MLS until it has the ENERGUIDE rating. You can post it right away as soon as it's ready for sale. And as soon as you have the ENERGUIDE rating, you add it to the postings. And if you've sold it in between, you just need to make sure that the assessment is done before the closing date. So we feel that that would help alleviate, again, that risk of bottlenecking the sale process. And finally, around selling homes with lower ENERGUIDE ratings, there's going to be customer education that's going to be needed. And I think a big part of this is going to be having it be present in the market and also having houses to compare with. Something that came up in the workshop was that, yes, it might be difficult, but at the same time, when people look at houses within a certain budget that they have, well, it's likely that the houses they're going to be looking at are going to be comparable in their ENERGUIDE rating or within a much narrower range than the entire range of ENERGUIDE ratings. So if people are looking to buy a fixer-upper, they will expect, they won't be surprised if the ENERGUIDE rating is low. And finally, a key way to help home sellers there is going to be to hire realtors. Realtors are expert at assessing the value of the home, see how the market is and how it should be priced to sell well. And realtors can help facilitate those conversations and even add value to the home buyers by bringing the ENERGUIDE report and saying, okay, you're buying a fixer-upper, and here's a series of recommendations for cost-effective ways to improve energy efficiency if that's a priority for you. So for home sellers to have that support of a realtor to help that process can be a great value add from realtor and a good way for realtors to differentiate themselves. Finally, advisor capacity is another point that was raised, partially in remote areas. Will an energy advisor have the time and the capacity to meet the additional demand? And we talked to a few service providing organizations, and so far, this is something that needs to be checked locally in each area where a pilot is being considered, and something we're going to do follow up on. But our sense so far from the service providers is that the extra demand could be accommodated. They might need to recruit and train 1 or 2 new staff, depending on the area. But if given enough forewarning, and if there's a clear demand that's expected, they can prepare for that. And regarding the timeliness and the affordability, again, NRCan has been setting sort of maximal costs and maximal wait time in contract with service organization, so that should continue to ensure that the service is available quickly and in an affordable way. And finally, jurisdiction. Do BC municipalities currently have the jurisdiction to mandate home energy labeling? And our legal research shows that it's actually unclear. The Local Government Act and the Community Charter are not very clear on this, and therefore we think that will be important to move forward to seek clarification with the province. And we're going to be, as part of phase 2, entering with that conversation with the province to sending a letter to the minister asking for clarification, or if some municipalities want to move forward on this, asking for concurrent authority, so the authority to implement such a pilot. So the big picture we got from this process is that we have a program design that's sound and that could work. There are some issues that tweaks and kinks that still needs to be resolved. There's no fundamental showstoppers from what we've seen so far. We also heard from communities and stakeholders, and it's also a belief that ideally this should be a province-wide program. But we believe that municipalities can lead the way and sort of create a space for the province to act on this. And frankly, the main barrier to implementation that we see is the acceptability. Will the real estate market and the communities and developers see the value in this and buy into the program. So the communication and the preparation of the community is key to a good program implementation. And now I'm going to pause and check at the end of each workshop to get a clear sense, because we have these heated conversations and people test us and push back, and people are churning a lot of information as well, trying to think, how could this work and what's not working for them. And at the end of the workshop, we would always do kind of a thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumb down check with the participants. And I'd like to do that with all of you now. Given what we've presented so far, and given the program as it stands now, would you be supportive of having a program be implemented in municipalities? And we won't hold you to it, it's just get a sense of where the audience is at, and for you to hear what the perspective is from different people. So here's a little poll for you. So you can select all the programs that you would see as valuable to implement, whether labeling for new buildings, a labeling requirement for existing buildings. You can select both, neither, or at this point it's too early to tell. And if you want to say, I would support it if, under certain caveats, well, please just write the caveats in the question box. That's going to be very useful information for us. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to do this. You can raise your hand if you have any crucial question, and you should type them in the question box. So about 3/4 of you have voted. I'm going to give you a few more minutes and give you time to have, if you have any thoughts and caveats, if you want to add any question box, do so. Okay, get your vote in. Last few stragglers. The time is now. Okay, so I'm going to close this poll, and I'm going to have a look at the results with all of you. Yeah, interesting. So most people, and there's a certain dimension of the people that are attracted to these webinars are already familiar and probably supportive in certain ways, but people are supportive of both new and existing buildings. 7% don't think it should be required, and I hope that we've had time to capture some of your thought in the question box. And another few people with no opinion at this time. Great, thanks. And the response we got from the workshops varied quite a bit, depending on which municipalities. It was, a mix from sort of half and half to mostly supportive to a pretty split base between new, generally have a lot more support for a program for new construction. Its implementation was a lot more straightforward than the program for existing buildings. And that was one of the kind of conclusion and recommendation of phase one and the report was there is still a lot of work to be done to get the market familiarized with ENERGUIDE ratings and ready, and even program administration internally for municipalities. So we thought that a phased-in approach would be probably the smartest way to go about it, and to start with a program for new homes, and then as capacity and awareness grows, extend the scope to existing homes. And this is sort of what we're proposing to do in phase two of this project. Part of why we think this is such a good route is that labeling for new construction has really good bang for your bucks. So as I said, it gets the market sort of prime. Home buyers will start to see on MLS ENERGUIDE ratings, will start to ask questions. Realtors will also start to get familiarized with it, start to use the system. Also, the municipality gets to collect data on the state of new construction. And the City of Vancouver, who's been mandating labeling for new construction since 2009, has a very interesting database now of what's being built right now. And the breadth of, despite Vancouver having a building code that's even a higher standard than the provincial building code, the breadth of ENERGUIDE ratings in Vancouver is quite large right now. So they've learned a lot by even just looking at the data they got from their new construction. And we believe that all municipalities will gain a lot from this. And also, last but not least, the builders, when we get the information based on plans, so even before the house is built, just based on the schematics, they get feedback right away. So this is what you could do to improve energy efficiency. And surveys with home buyers and people that get homes built have shown that people are interested in energy efficiency, but often just are not given that choice. And if home buyers have that information early and can potentially have that conversation with prospective buyers or even people that are getting the house built for themselves, we can actually see a lot of improvement in the design before it's built. So we believe there's opportunity there to gain in efficiency even just from that early information. And finally, biggest bang for your buck, because a program for new labeling is definitely the easiest to implement. So it ties directly to the permitting process. There's a kind of real-time connection with the municipality. There's only a small numbers of sellers, and instead of trying to reach all private home sellers, you have a limited number of developers and builders that are already trained and familiar with energy efficiency with an ENERGUIDE system, and how are used to interfacing with programs from municipalities and having requirements to meet. So in terms of rolling it out, it's a lot easier. And also the homes that will get rated to start with should have reasonable energy ratings. And so that early conversation with home buyers and realtors will happen kind of in a more positive tone in a sense. And so here's where our call to us is. There's opportunity for all of you to engage in this phase to, if you're realtors or developers or builders, and you believe this is a great idea and you want to help us think through how to implement this program in a way that minimize red tapes and maximize flow and ease, we'd like to hear from you. There's definitely an opportunity to, we'll have processes to engage with you, so please get in touch. And for local government, so staff and councillors, we're asking you, please be one of the pilot communities. We have some funding that you can leverage to work on the next phase and develop how implementation might work. And we're open for new partners to join in. So,
And Tom Pierre, on that note, we seem to have connected with Kevin Henderson from Dawson Creek, so this might be a good opportunity while some of the other communities are mulling over if they want to join as a partner. We can give Kevin a couple of minutes to just speak to their experience having the workshops in their community on labeling and what their possible next steps are on this project. So I'll just get Kevin unmuted here and see if it's working. Kevin, are you there?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Sorry about the technical difficulties. So the floor is yours.
No problem. Thank you. Yeah, just thought I would touch base a little bit on the workshop that we had and just kind of reiterate what Tom Pierre had said, that we had a pretty good cross-section of people here in Dawson Creek attend. We had local contractors, we had some realtors, we had some counselors and some people from the public, and it was a great opportunity to discuss the program. And the feedback that we got is that you know, I think from a consumer point of view, there'd be a real appetite for something like this. I think from the local contractors standpoint, at least the people that attended, the feedback was that they would love to have something that would really showcase the quality of their products that they construct. Probably the only things that we saw a little bit of pushback on or some concerns was, like Tom Pierre had mentioned, is from the realtors, some concerns over, you know, obviously having some different ratings and how that may or may not affect sales. And you know, locally, maybe just capacity for the energy audits themselves. You know, whether there is or there isn't enough capacity to do the volume that would be necessary. So overall, I thought it was very informative and certainly gave us an indication of where some of the people in the community are at.
Great, thanks a lot, Kevin. And Tom Pierre, I'll just turn it back over to you just for a moment.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. It was great to calibrate on this, and we're sort of looking forward to continuing the conversation and addressing some of those pending, you know, okay, now it's time to take a hard look locally and make sure before we roll this out that there is capacity. Those sort of checks that we need to do before rolling this out is what we're looking into doing into the phase 2. So to give you a bit more of a picture of what that would look like, partially with a new community, we would start by engaging council on this and sort of presenting some of the thoughts. And once council sort of buys into this and says, yeah, this is something we want to look into, the first step we have to do is request the concurrent authority or request clarification of jurisdiction from the province. And that's something that we'll be doing. We'll be sending a letter to the minister before the elections, and we'll be following up with a letter probably after the election, whoever forms the new government. And that's going to follow its course. And hopefully our hopes also that the province is, you know, as we're having this conversation, is hearing that this is something that municipalities believe is valuable and they want to see action on. So, you know, we're thinking that the province is turning on this. The new government is organizing from one party or another and getting their priorities straight. And at some point during the fall, late fall, we're going to hear back from them. But in the meantime, we can continue the work and continue the conversation, looking more focused now on builders and developers, because we're looking at implementing a program for new construction. So I want to test with them how, you know, in detail how that would work and how to make it work well for them. And that would mainly happen through sort of interviews and conversations. And we'll probably not at this point go through another round of workshops. The other part of this is that we want to consider tagging into this a FEEBATE incentive program, and I'll give you more about this in a second. So that'll be also part of the conversation. Then at some point during the fall, we're going to present back those results to council see where they're at, see if the program makes sense, see what we heard in the community, finalize the design, and develop a communication plan, which will include kind of broader outreach to the developer community. And by then, we'll have a sense of hopefully where the province stands, and if we have the capacity to implement in terms of jurisdiction, we can look at an implementation as early as winter 2014. But that'll depend on what's deemed feasible in terms of timeline to bring capacity online and bring people on board. And I want to touch quickly on this idea of FEEBATE as a kind of great ally or adjacent part to labeling. A FEEBATE program basically offers a rebate on fees based on the performance on building construction fees based on performance of buildings. And if this rebate is balanced on the other side by an increase on the permitting fees, the program as a whole can be self-financing and pretty much revenue neutral. So Vancouver is looking into this and is proposing a program in their new amendment, which was going to go to council relatively soon, I believe. And they're proposing a $3,000 incentives per point above ENERGUIDE 80. Portland's also has a similar program that they're proposing for multi-unit residential buildings with incentives from $5 to $55 per square meter for LEED Silver or Plus, depending on the LEED certification. So we believe this is something we want to look at because it offers a way to multiply the effects of the program by incentivizing not only the sharing of information and disclosure of the energy data, but also incentivizing upgrades. And also, it's also a plan B if we were to not, if the conversation with the province was to stall, or if the jurisdiction clarification does not happen, well, we can still move forward on labeling on a more kind of voluntary basis, but with a really good carrot, which would be a FEEBATE program. So taking a FEEBATE approach to incentivize labeling. So that can be kind of the fallback plan based on the results of the conversation around jurisdiction with the province. And so yeah, that's our proposal, and we're hoping that you will join us.
Tom Pierre is looking at me. It's Ellen here. Just wanted to say that if you're not a Gibble partner yet, we're always interested in working with leading municipalities and on a number of programs. And you could see from the diagram at the beginning that Claire showed you, we do have a number of projects on the go, and including community energy workshops as well as the labeling. So we'd be happy to talk to you if you're interested in joining us. Thanks, Tom Pierre.
And we're going to take time for questions now. Claire.
Great. Thanks, Tom Pierre and Ellen, and thanks for everyone sticking with us. We have about 10 minutes left, and if we can stay a little bit after the hour if there's questions, so if you can stay with us, we're happy to address them. Just wanted to remind everyone that if you do want to ask a question, just type it into the question box, and I'll start from the top and work our way through. And if there's questions we don't do in the time allotted, we'll follow up directly with those people that type in the questions. So Tom Pierre, we see you fiddling with your presentation. So we're going to first go to the first question, which is coming from Jim Bennett. And this is just a bit of a simple question, but it says, buildings represent a certain portion of emissions in the province. But either Tom Pierre and Ellen, do you know the breakdown between residential and commercial buildings?
Not on hands. If I remember well, more than half is residential, but I would need to look into that. Give you actual figures.
Sure, Jim. We can follow up with you directly, and we can forward on some resources on that. And
I suspect that there's folks on the call like Eric, Kay, or others that probably have this answer ready. Yeah. They can probably just type it in the question box.
I have a note here. that of the overall emissions in BC, in the whole province of BC, about 12% of the full emissions are from residential and commercial buildings, and 60% of those are from residential. So it's really a considerable amount of emissions that are coming from residential buildings, particularly when you're looking at communities themselves, not the overall provincial emissions, but for communities, residential building stock is you can look for each individual community has its own report that will give you a specific number for that, but residential buildings are a really significant amount of the building stock, particularly for communities.
Great, and the following question is again from Jim Bennett, and it's more of a comment, but this goes back to one of the figures you had the earliest part of the presentation where it says 10% of Canadian homes are labeled. That's not bad, right? So I think
and you're right. You're right, Jim. We should definitely celebrate what we already, and what it shows is that there is some readiness in the market, that people are familiar with the system more and more. And to me, like, it shows that we're 10% is great, and we've had kind of a long lead in to get there, and now it's time to push to get to 80% so that it becomes business as usual.
And I think I would add into that one of the things that doesn't happen right now is that ENERGUIDE rating doesn't stay with the home as it changes owners. So the owners may decide to hand that off to new owners, but it's not required. So at this point, although we've rated 10% of the buildings, we don't actually have a label associated with those buildings that stays with that building as ownership changes. So you're absolutely right to celebrate that, and then think about how we can move forward and improve on that as well.
Next question is, with more senior government financial incentives for having energy assessments done, couldn't the 10% coverage grow to 20% if the incentives returned? So I think this question is just asking if there were greater incentives for retrofits or even potentially covering the cost of an assessment. I think it's my
I mean, that's a bit what that was the attempt of the two pilots that were made in BC, you know, and Jim would be in a better place to talk more about how those went and what were some of the lessons learned, and, you know, what could have made them better. But so this is what they did. They incentivized and they publicized and they, you know, put a lot of energy into outreaching with realtors and letting them know, you know, this is free, you can go and do it, or this is, you know, half price. Yeah, there was very little uptake. So, you know, after 15 years of a voluntary program, we think the time is right to, you know, just make it as straightforward and as simple as labeling on food. It's just something that's there, and there's going to be some adjustment time, but very quickly it's just going to become business as usual, and we won't even think about it again.
Next question is coming from Patricia Denell, and apologies if I'm getting names wrong, but the question is, can the ENERGUIDE label that is noted on the pre-assessment report be used as a label, or would it be mandatory to have the actual label that is only provided at the time of the post-assessment?
Can you read that one again, Claire?
Sure. So can the ENERGUIDE label that is noted on the pre-assessment report be used, or would it be mandatory to have the label that is only provided at the time of a post-assessment?
Thank you. A great question. And we could use just the pre-assessment label. Basically, the pre and post is dependent on whether there was a retrofit in between. So there's no need to have a closing audit. People can just have one audit and use this. However, if they act on it and say, well, I think, you know, I'm going to increase the value of my home if I do these renovations, then there's value for them to get the closing assessment. They're going to get incentives if they're available, and also to have an updated, increased ENERGUIDE rating to put on MLS. So if they do have a post-assessment and it shows an increase, totally valuable to share it, but it's not necessary.
Next question is coming from Eric K. So his question is, who would be responsible to compare the list of energy assessments with the tax roll list of new homeowners? How often are the tax roll lists updated, and what is the penalty for non-compliance?
I like when we get into the weeds of program detail and management. So this might differ from municipality to municipality, but this, given that what we're proposing here is a municipal pilot, at this point, that would be the municipality that would take that on as a way to assess how the pilot is, whether there's compliance. We would love for the province to take that on at some point. And the data, if I remember correctly, they get, the municipality get information from BC Assessment weekly on what was sold, but there is a delay because that information has to go through several channels before it goes back to the municipality. So, you know, there is going to be a delay before the moment where the municipality gets the information and can check, oh, this house was sold, did it get an energy assessment, and when the time the house was actually sold. It's going to be probably a month's delay. So it's not a kind of rapid fire feedback loop, but in our sense, it's enough to get a sense of this is how, you know, this is how well this is working. And if we, you know, if we feel the need to have kind of more of a compliance, wave the stick a little bit, we have something we can go to the home seller who's ultimately responsible for getting the audit. Let's say you didn't get this audit, you know, here's potentially the fine for you. We don't believe that there's going to be the need to wave the stick, but the potentiality of the stick is an important part of the program.
So I'm just going to take a pause in the questions at the moment because we're coming right up on the hour, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone for coming to our webinar and participating for the last hour and listening to some of the research and the work that we've been doing. As I mentioned, we'll stay online and work our way through the questions that are still remaining if people are interested in staying, but I know that often people need to jump off on the hour. So just wanting to say thank you again, and wanting to note that, as you can see on this last slide, that if you want to see the more detailed report of the complete research that we did for the pilot program design, there's a link there that you can access it, and it is also on our website. And again, a reminder, if there's any communities who are not currently participating in the Green Building Leaders Project, get in touch with Ellen, and she can let you know how to get involved or give you further details on some of the other research that we're doing.